Hello, this is Professor Gavoor. We're going to cover Chapter 17 of the Flat World book, Information Security, Barbarians at the Gateway, and just about everywhere else, trying to steal your information. So we want to recognize that information security breaches are on the rise. I don't think we have to actually point that out to everybody. It's probably a well-known fact. And understand the potentially damaging impact of security breaches and the impact that could have on people. We want to recognize that information security must be made a top organizational priority, and I think for large corporations it almost already is. So, what are the factors that can amplify a firm's vulnerability of a breach? Well, you have personnel issues, technology problems, procedural factors, operational issues, all of these things. Mostly the portals are gained through an errant email, or someone is able to take someone's password and sneak in, or maybe there's an actual hack on the system and you find a customer gateway somehow. It requires constant vigilance regarding security needs, and you have to try to keep up with what the bad guys are doing or try to stay one step ahead of them. They say a key component is an organization's culture, and a lot of companies are doing training on, training people to recognize a phishing email that looks like it could be from someone in the company, and if you respond, or you open an attachment, and a virus is introduced, which allows the hacker then to break in. So, something like 110 million records are stolen. 40 million credit cards from 1,800 different stores, and additional personal information on 70 million consumers. I mean, you've all read about the Target breach that was epic, but there's so many more, and I'm sure there's others that people aren't even aware about. So, according to this, there's a third of the U.S. consumers are impacted by this, and the breach was followed by the firm's largest ever decline in transactions. So they took a hit the following quarter, but they have obviously since recovered, and I'm sure patched those holes that caused the Target incursion, if you will. You want to understand the source and motivation for those initiating information security attacks. Let's say, they want to steal credit card numbers and sell them. They want to steal credit card numbers and use them themselves. They want to siphon money if they can. They want to encrypt all the data in your system and then ransom you to get the encryption code, the code that will unencrypt the data and allow you to continue operations again. So these are huge things. You want to relate examples of various infiltrations in a way that helps raise organizational awareness of the threats. So there's extortion, there's espionage, there's cyber warfare, there's terrorism, there's just pranksters. I don't see as many pranksters doing it as I see extortion, espionage, cyber warfare. I don't know about terrorism, but certainly that could happen. There could be protest hacking, revenge from a disgruntled employee, intellectual property theft, which isn't that the same as espionage. Well, I guess it's espionage if it's a government, and it's intellectual property theft if it's espionage directed at a company. There was in the news today, I just heard that the government of Canada announced that there's been just an unprecedented amount of activity from China trying to break into their public and corporate records, trying to steal company secrets and whatnot to gain advantage in terms of military, diplomacy, and business. So governments are doing this and spending a lot of money on it, because why invent something if you could steal someone else's? Why is this happening? Who's doing it? What's the motivation? Well, account theft and illegal funds transfer, sure. Some hackers steal data for personal use. Data harvesters sell to cash out fraudsters. And a data harvester is a cyber criminal who infiltrates the systems and collect data for illegal resale. So a lot of times if you're breached, you wonder, why has my credit card not been hacked or used or stuff? It might be sold to someone else who then tries to use it. Cash out fraudsters. Well, criminals that purchase assets from data harvesters to use for illegal financial gain. And why rob a bank when you can do this? It's white collar, it's clean, it's hard to trace, and hard to track down. So they might buy goods using stolen credit cards or false accounts, and stealing personal or financial data. There's also the ransomware, where you actually encrypt the data of an individual, or more likely a corporation, and then charge them an exorbitant amount of money, which they will probably gladly pay, to have their data unencrypted and be able to go forth. Compromising computing assets for use in other crimes. Well, botnets send spam, launch click fraud efforts, or stage distributed denial of service attacks. So botnets are hordes of surreptitiously infiltrated computers controlled remotely. We always hear about robots doing this and that. And if you have a blog like I do, and you do a lot of Twitter to try to get people to read it, it's unclear whether actual people are reading it or these botnets are actually reading it. But if you're interested in just getting hits to your website, I suppose it doesn't really matter. Distributed denial of service attacks, shutting down websites with a crushing load of seemingly legitimate requests. So you flood it with questions, you flood it with, and you slow down the web. And I this is more of a matter of protest, I guess, than anything else. Or maybe a disgruntled ex-employee doing that or something. I'm not entirely versed on this part. Well, Stuxnet was a new era of cyber warfare. It's unclear. It was the one that infiltrated the Iranian nuclear facilities and reprogrammed the industrial control software operating hundreds of uranium-enriching centrifuges, and probably put them years behind. What happens if the code spread to systems operated by peaceful nations? It was unclear whether Iran was going to be peaceful or not, but anyway, I think the U.S. and Israel, who I think probably initiated the attack, it's one of the two or both together, and it's never really been clear. And sometimes we don't like to admit that we might do the same thing that we accuse others of doing to us. Despite these precautions, other malicious code that appears to have a common heritage with Stuxnet have been spotted on systems outside of Iran. If you can invent it and do it, and other people figure out how you invented it and did it, they could do the same. I guess this one was a rather insidious virus that was really hard to eliminate from the systems. So, is your government spying on you? I don't know. Government, what do they want to do? They want to look at all my pictures. They want to look at who I'm connected with on Facebook and Instagram. I guess they're more than welcome to, I guess. It's what are they going to learn? But if they want to keep track on people, the number of computers, the number of servers, the number of ways people can do this, the book 1984 from George Orwell, we're probably not far off from that ability to do it. There's video cameras almost everywhere. You've seen the quasi-science fiction movies where they can keep track of you, whatever you're doing, wherever you are, wherever you're going, whoever you're interfacing with. And for the most part, probably 99.9% of the citizens, maybe even 99.999% of the citizens, they don't really care about. But for that 1% that they really want to track, they can do it. Well, you think if they could do that, there would be no terrorist activity of any kind, but there still seems to be that. So I don't know how good or bad people are at this. The government surveillance came under scrutiny when the whole Edward Snowden gathered 1.7 million digital documents from U.S., British, and Australian agencies and began leaking them to the press to find out what people were doing. They revealed several U.S. government agencies had data monitoring efforts far more pervasive than anybody realized. Watch the movie, The Social Media documentary, as I suggested earlier. That'll scare the bejeebers out of you. The way that it's not that they're surveilling you. Well, they're surveilling you, but the way you're being manipulated by social media. X Keyscore allows the collection of data on nearly everything a user does on the internet. Well, I think that's what Facebook and Google and a lot of these companies do. They make their money from advertising, not from being kind and benevolent and offering social media and networking to you. It's a huge business. Under U.S. law, the NSA is required to obtain a warrant when they're targeting surveillance in the United States. But if it's just an open network, I don't know that they need a warrant to do that kind of just monitoring what's happening. I don't know, and I'm not sure any of us know. U.S. technology firms have also complained that the actions of surveillance agencies put them at a disadvantage with customers. Well, some of the things that technology firms do should put them at a disadvantage with customers too. If you want to get technical about it. It just depends who's doing the surveillance and how they're using your personal information and for what end. So hacker, good or bad. It's a term that may be applied to either someone who breaks into a computer or to a particularly clever programmer. I think when we use it, we're talking about someone who breaks into a computer. The term I've not heard, white hat and black hat, uncover computer weaknesses. These are the people that are on your first line of defense. They try to hack into your computer. You've hired them to do it so they can expose all your weaknesses, and then you can try to take some mitigating action. So their job is to help improve system security. Black hat hackers are the criminals who exploit a system's weakness for personal gain. Hacktivists are protesters that want to make a political point by leveraging technology tools or infiltrating, defacing, or damaging the reputation of either a company or a government agency or the government itself. Griefers or trolls are malicious pranksters. I don't hear much about them anymore. We hear more about, and we either hear about criminal black hat hackers, I guess they'd call them here, or government-funded espionage of either governments or other governments or corporations. So we want to recognize here the potential for entry points for this kind of compromise. Understand the techniques that are used, such as social engineering, phishing, malware, website compromises, and such. Identify various methods and techniques to thwart the infiltration. So this is a rather busy slide, but you have users and administrators. You could have a bad apple, you could have social engineering or phishing, weak or easily compromised passwords, careless or uninformed users, insecure sharing settings, no encryption, software dates turned off, poor configuration. A lot of large corporations are taking, you can't, what do you do about the bad apple or the person that's disgruntled with the company and purposely tries to answer all phishing requests, which everybody gets them all the time. If they're not blocked by the system, you get it. Your network could be an issue. You could have uncompromised relays and equipment. You could have redirects, weak user authentication or open hotspots, physical threats. If people dive into the dumpster to get information and maybe someone's written their passwords on a piece of paper and Post-its and whatever, eavesdropping, keyloggers, cameras, mics, devices mailed or left on premises, destruction of property, I guess terrorism you could have. I don't hear much about that. And then you have client vulnerabilities, operating system holes, weaknesses in applications, language in applications, applets, smartphones, and connected automobiles that are easier to hack into than the actual system itself. Network device, Internet of Things, smart speakers, TVs, watches, all of these things are vulnerable to someone that knows what they're doing. Computing hardware, you could have removable media, USB, DVDs, etc., and that will move a malware from one computer to another very easily. I remember when I was teaching at CLC, and we used to take all of our files on USBs from computer to computer in the various classrooms and between our home computers. The next thing you know, your home computer is full of viruses because the CLC network was a cesspool of viruses. So I think people have gotten away from that and are using more cloud-based stuff, which I think is a little bit more secure, because the cloud-based Box and Dropbox and those kinds of Evernotes probably have good security, and it's more of a closed system to a certain degree. Server and software, you have operating system holes again, application weaknesses, again, languages. So it's the same thing as client vulnerabilities almost. Applets and applications poorly coded, allow for SQL injection. So if people can get in there and do some, whatever they do, I don't know how to do it, so I can't explain it well. And unfederated systems, which means entering one system allows access to others. So you want the right kinds of security walls between things. Bad apples are the rogue employees, like we said, that steal secrets, install malware, or hold a firm hostage if they can. I don't hear much about that. Social engineering, con games that trick employees into revealing information or performing other tasks that compromise a firm or your own personal information. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. If it looks like an email that's from somebody important in the company, but doesn't sound like something they would ever send you, be careful, be suspicious. Don't just open every attachment. Don't just, and that's what most of the training tells you to do. Phishing, these are cons executed using technology in order to acquire sensitive information or trick someone into installing malicious software. Email transmissions and packets that have been altered to forge or disguise their origin of entity. So it's also a form of, I think, phishing. You get spoofed by something like this. I got an email once from the president of North Park. It says, "I'd like to speak to you this afternoon. Let me know when you're available." And I responded, I said, "Well, I'm available." And then I realized, oh man, look at the email's not even the right email. So I reported it to IT, and they looked into it and realized it was a phishing exercise. I'm not sure what the details were behind it, but the first line of defense is oftentimes the employees. They're the first, they could be the easiest people to compromise. So 0-day exploits. These are new attacks that haven't been identified. So it's like, oh, the first time we're seeing this. Oh my God, we haven't seen it before. And this is what really can get to people. Because if you haven't seen it before, you don't have a defense for it. And I remember the first time I got one, it was something about, you should never reply to these emails. And I had to instruct my mother not to do that, because she would get these emails, offering some ridiculous things. She realized it was a spam, but she replied to them and lectured them. Why are you doing this? You shouldn't do this. This is not the right thing. You should be ashamed of yourselves. And I'm like, Mom, that's what they want you to do, is engage them and respond. Don't do it. Just delete them. And finally, I think she learned. So, solutions for building a better password: biometrics, measure and analyze human body characteristics, facial recognition, which I have in my iPhone 12. That's kind of good. I guess that would work. Luckily, no two people nobody else looks like me, which is probably good for them. Multi-factor authentication. I like this one. It's kind of a pain in the butt. I got used to having all my passwords saved and immediately signing it to Gmail, immediately signing it to this, that, and the other thing. But that made it easy for anybody else to hack into it. Now, if I have my phone and I have, like when I try to get into Canvas, it requires a two-factor authentication. I sign in, I use my password, and then it sends me an email that says, or a text, and I have the authenticator on my phone. And was it you that's trying to log in? Yes, it's me. And then you sign in and you're okay. That's good for bank accounts. I don't want other people doing it. I don't mind it for that. I don't mind it for my investment account. It's all, I get these emails all the time. So this seems to be one step ahead. I guess there's a way of foiling that, but it just makes it more complicated to do. Are things foolproof? Nothing is foolproof. People can still break into your house if you have an alarm system. An alarm system is a deterrent, and it makes it the likely thief probably should go to a house with no alarm and rob that, than rob your house with an alarm, just because it's more complicated to try to break into yours. But they could break in, and if they knew where they were going and what they were looking for, and quickly took things and escaped before the police would come, which could be anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour, depending on where you live, I suppose, they could still do it. And people can still get around these things. Malware seeks to compromise a computing system without permission. It's a method of infection. It's a software that, if you go to the wrong website or open the wrong attachment, these things get planted. You always wonder how your browser, when you pick, let's say Google to be your default search engine, and then next thing you know, it's Yahoo. And everything is Yahoo related. And you're like, no, and you try to change it back to Google, and it only lasts for about 2 searches, and then it goes back to Yahoo. You've got some malware. And the malware is just to drive people to and it may be more nefarious than this, but it's to drive people to use Yahoo to raise the stature of the Yahoo search engine. Viruses infect other software, and vile worms take advantage of security vulnerability to automatically spread to all computers. Trojan Horse is exactly what it sounds like, an attempt to sneak in by masquerading as something they're not. But it's a Trojan Horse that will deliver the worm or the virus. It looks like an attachment that says, if you get one from me, but it's not really from me, and it's maybe even the return address is not mine, but it has my name on it, and there's an attachment that says assignment update, urgent, and you open it, and it's not that. All of a sudden, you've got some malware somewhere. Our goals of malware. Botnets and zombie networks used in click fraud, sending spam to decipher accounts that use CAPTCHAs. CAPTCHAs are scrambled character images to thwart automated account setup or ticket buying attempts. Malicious adware installed without the user's consent or knowledge later serve unwanted advertisements. Slow your computer down. These things are just nasty. But I think a lot of malware is easy to clean, and you have to have some sort of software that I think is provided to constantly sweep your computer of these things. Originally, the Apple computers were not subject to viruses. That's, I think, no longer the case. They figured out how to get around that. Spyware monitors use actions, traffic networks scan. There's a fear that, gee whiz, people can, they're going to put a virus on your machine that will allow them to turn your camera on without you even knowing it. So you'll see people that have something taped over their, a flap over their camera So in case anybody does that, they can't see what I'm doing. Who knows? Keylogger records user keystrokes, which will capture all of your passwords to whatever you do. Screen capture records pixels that appear on the screens to identify proprietary information. There's all kinds of things. Goals of malware. Card skimmer captures data from a card's magnetic strip. Well, you don't use that in your computer. They would put a skimmer on an ATM machine. And I haven't heard about that lately, but I think it used to be more prevalent than maybe it is. RAM scraping or storage scanning software. So it's code that scans for sensitive data from your RAM on your machine. Ransomware, I've heard about. And this seems to be, it's kind of an insidious and clever, if you ask me, way of doing things. Malware that encrypts the user's files and demands that the user pay to regain control of the data. So if you back up your data, you at least can go back a day or two and restore your system, but that's a lot of work. Maybe it's worth $100,000 not to do that. You don't want to pay the ransom, but you pay it, and then you hire some more cybersecurity experts to come in and make sure that it never happens again. But if they charge you, if they break in and encrypt everything on your corporate computer, and you know that it's going to cost them, let's say, $800,000 to do it, and you only charge them $400,000 to get the code, it may be cheaper for them to do that, and people will take the easier, cheaper route. And you can make a lot of money. And how do they do that? They do it with Bitcoin. You have to, which is untraceable. Which, I mean, it's a brilliant criminal business to get into if you have a criminal mind and want the minimum risk of getting caught. I'm not advocating anyone does that. I won't do it myself. Sounds like too much work, and any risk is too much. Blended threats, attacks combining multiple malware and hacking exploits. I think that's what, when you say, the U.S. systems, banking system was under a complete attack, or a heavy attack today. Well, when they say heavy, it's probably blended. They probably tried every portal and tried to break in and steal money and do all those kinds of things. So the advantage of having everything electronic is good, but it makes the bank robbery move from face-to-face masked nylon stockings over your head gunpoint robbery to sophisticated cyber criminal robbery. Compromising poorly designed software. Well, SQL or SQL injection targets sloppily programmed practices that do not validate user input. I'm not sure exactly how that works. Related programming exploits go by such name as cross-site scripting attacks, buffer overflow vulnerabilities, and HTTP header injection. Maybe you don't go to you think you're going to Amazon, but it's not Amazon. It's something that looks like Amazon. And next thing you know, we need to reconfirm your credit card. Please enter your credit card number. And if 1 out of 10,000 people, 1 out of 500 people do it, well, they've got credit card numbers. And next thing you know, they're sold and they're spending your money. Push bucket hacking tools are designed to easily automate attacks. Well, you have network threats. The network itself is a source of compromise. But physical threats, combing through the trash to identify valuable assets that could help them break in. Shoulder surfing. Well, when I'm at home, I'm always looking over my shoulder to see who might be looking at what I'm doing. No, I don't, because usually when I'm home, I'm by myself. Eavesdropping, such as efforts to listen into or record conversations, transmissions, or keystrokes. There was when people used to use calling cards before cell phones became popular. Long-distance calling cards were really popular. And gee whiz, if you ever used your calling card at Grand Central Station in New York, like I did, to make a call while you're waiting before you jump on a train, if you get to the Grand Central and you still have 15 minutes, so you hop on a payphone and pull out your credit card, and someone way across, using a small telescope or maybe even binoculars, um, records the keystrokes, and next thing you know, they have your calling card. And then they'll go to a a neighborhood with immigrants from like Dominican Republic, and use your credit card on a payphone, and charge people $5 a phone call, which might have cost $20 normally, and so they use it until it gets caught, and then they go back to Grand Central and steal a mess of other ones, and it was a real scam. So it does happen. They tell you at the gas station, guard your PIN, because that's what you're guarding it from. Someone in another car with a camera that's with a zoom lens that might be looking, look around and see. Doesn't happen often, but it does happen. The encryption prescription. Well, encryption is scrambling data using a code, thereby hiding it from those that do not have an unlocking key. When you say encrypted instant messaging, like Apple phones have, these use a sophisticated system, and to break the code is really, really hard. And I remember when these codes first came out, when they first said every kid in the world wants to have a secret code so you can send messages to your friend. Well, no one's trying to hack your secret messages on paper that you're passing in between class, but it was a fun thing that some of us used to do when we were kids. You'd use the alphabet backwards, you'd delay the alphabet, A would be D, B would be E, etc., and then you just use it. Those codes are ridiculously easy to hack by someone that knows what they're doing, and especially if you have computers, it's even easier to hack. But somewhere in the 80s, there became an encryption methodology that used really, really, really large prime numbers. And we keep calculating newer and newer prime numbers. And you have to actually know the prime number that's being used. And I think they're almost impossible to break. The amount of computing time required to crack that code is so big that it takes so much time that it's almost impossible to do. By the time they crack it, it doesn't matter anymore. Whatever they're going to use the information for is no longer valid. So I think they use these kinds of encryption methodologies that are impossible to use. These are what ransomware people use, and the encryption code they send you has something to do with that prime number inscription, and how they encrypt all this stuff. So the key is what unlocks that. So brute force attacks, you can exhaust all possible passwords to break into an account. But then the encryption, you can't use that brute force because they have to be able to calculate the prime number, which is, 75 digits long, probably really hard to do. It is really hard to do, but I don't understand the number theory behind it. Public key encryption, two-key system for securing electronic transmissions. Well, that's what we do. That's what Apple cell phones use at. Certificate authority, trusted third party that provides authentication services in public key inscription schemes. There was a terrorism event in Santa Barbara, California, and they were the federal government wanted to get into the phone. They wanted Apple to help them decode the messages. Apple said, that's not what we do. It's private, and we keep it private, and that's what we sell. And there was big lawsuits about it, and I'm not sure, I can't even remember. I think Apple eventually had to help them. Identify critical steps to improve your individual organizational information security. So, advocate the tips and tricks and techniques that are needed. Communicate them with your friends, family, colleagues, organization. This is like be vigilant, basically. And tell everybody else to be vigilant. And, that works to a certain point. But people are suspect, and especially if some of these emails are so clever and make it sound like it's such a good deal, or it's from such an important person that you're feeling, uh, this is the way cons work. The same way cons work is the same way phishing emails work. If they can hook you into the con, you're susceptible and vulnerable. So recognize the major information security issues that organizations face, and as well as resource methods and approaches that can help make the firms and your own systems more secure. So surf smart, stay vigilant, stay updated, install a full suite of security software, secure home networks and encrypt hard drives, regularly update passwords, be disposal smart, shred everything, I guess. Regularly back up your system, and keep, check with your administrator. Well, your administrator will probably send regular updates that you should pay attention to. Follow framework standards and compliance. So the International Standards Organization, ISO, has a couple series: establishing, implementing, operating, monitoring, reviewing, maintaining, and improving an information security management system. It outlines the steps you have to take to do that, and what you have to do. It doesn't tell you exactly how to do it, or what software to use, or what consultants to use, or whatever, but it tells you the things that you have to do, and then you go out and figure out how to do them in the best way that's affordable for your company. Compliance requirements, legal or professionally binding steps that must be taken. Dealing with the government, there are some legal steps that will be required if you're handling any kind of sensitive information, whether it's classified or not, for the government. Education, audit, and enforcement. So the functions of R&D: understanding emerging threats and updating security techniques, working on broader governance issues. That should happen at the R&D level. Employees should know a firm's policies and be regularly trained, understand the penalties for failing to meet these obligations, and there should be audits, real-time monitoring of usage. They should be announced audits, and there should be surprised audits. I mean, you could send a phishing email yourself to all your employees and see how many people fall for it, and then use it as a teaching methodology. I thought the other thing would be to, no one's ever talked about this, but I think that you could make if you see you're under cyber attack, why not let them in, but thwart them to a different place where you have false information, so they can steal and encrypt and do all this stuff that they want to the false information that would be misleading, and maybe infect the information they steal from you with a malware that can track you to the hackers. Why not? I mean, they were talking about, there's websites where you can learn how to make bombs, and that's not good for terrorists. Well, gee whiz, why don't you alter that website, hack into it yourself as a government, and change the directions for making the bomb so that the bomb blows up while they're making it. Oops. You can find the terrorists easy. Follow the smoke plume. I don't know. I think there's all kinds of things that you can do. You can use mainly the same techniques, I would think, to thwart them. I don't know if we're there yet, and maybe it's just my ideas are not right, but I think there's some of those things that you can do. If they're going to overwhelm you with false information, well, overwhelm them with false information. Have all kinds of chemical formulas that are nonsense, that look right but are wrong. If they're trying to steal your COVID vaccine, oops, we're protecting ours, but we're going to let you think you stole something, and it doesn't really work, or it's something that it's just wrong. Okay, firms should avoid spending money targeting unlikely exploits. I don't know what that means by targeting unlikely exploits. Underinvesting in methods to thwart common infiltration techniques. You should not underinvest in methods to thwart the common things. You probably don't want to spend money on things that are, so there's a risk. This is what they're talking about. There's a risk factor here. If something is unlikely to happen, should you spend a lot of money on it? No. But you should be aware of what the risks are and what the latest trends and techniques in cyber movement are. You don't want to be the first person to get blasted by some zero-day event. Your risk assessment team, consider the vulnerabilities and countermeasure investments that are required, and lobbying for legislation that imposes severe penalties on crooks if you can catch them. You don't hear about a lot of these cyber criminals being actually caught. Snowden being the only one that comes to mind. Lower one's likelihood of being a victim. Make it harder for them to break into your system than someone else's. I mean, it's the same thing with home security and building security. Patches, software updates that plug existing holes. Always be vigilant of it. Always be trying to have someone break into your own system. If they can find the methods, bad folks will find the same methods. Try to plug the holes beforehand. Lock down the software. Prevent unapproved software installation. Sometimes when people try to use non-North Park computers, their work computer to do their North Park homework, sometimes they're thwarted from even loading some of the software like I use in my quantitative methods class. So people are forced to then have to use a personal laptop or a personal computer to do that. Force file saving to harden backed up and monitored servers. Re-image hard drives of end user PCs. Disable boot capability of removable media. Really wipe things out if it's taken away, or and who uses thumb drives and DVDs anymore anyway? I think that's gone. Prevent Wi-Fi use and require VPN encryption for network transmission. That's probably an excellent advice. Lockdown networks, firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and honeypots, tempting bogus targets meant to lure hackers. That's kind of like the false portals that we're talking about, so that you could lure the hackers there instead of to where you want them to go, and then feed them with false information. So I guess maybe we're doing that. Blacklist, deny the entry of specific IP addresses and other entities, even though people come up with new IP addresses all the time. Whitelist, permit communication only with approved entities or in an approved manner. That's, basically saying who has the need to use this information, the need to know this information. Lockdown partners, insist on partner firms being compliant with your security guidelines and audit them regularly. Use access controls to control data access on a need-to-know basis, as I just mentioned. Don't be very careful with that. And so you need groups of people. While you've saved a lot of money on your ERP system, you have to put people on these kinds of activities, or you will probably increase the risk of being hacked and having a business disrupting hacking activities. Use recording, monitoring, and auditing to hunt for patterns of abuse. Maintain multiple administrators to jointly control key systems. And audit for SQL injection and other application exploits. And then you need to have a failure recovery plan. What happens if we get encrypted? Or how would we react to it? How much would it cost us? How much time would it take us to get back up and running? If your computer systems are down, most companies can't do business, period. It's that simple. So, and if they're down for a long period of time, it starts becoming real money. And if it's a ransomware kind of thing, you will spend money to get back to work. Share knowledge on hacking techniques with technology partners. Broad awareness reduces organizational stigma in coming forward. So, you're going to get bad press if you get hacked into, but maybe it's because you're flat-footed, but there should be a way that you should be able to, companies should band together to share information to better have security measures to thwart attacks of these various kinds. So that's an introduction to this. It's an entire field. and a set of courses in itself if you want to become a cybersecurity specialist or engineer or information systems specialist. What we did here was just get a little sip from the fire hose and see what it's like. But pay attention to it. It's always in the press. There's always information on the new ways people are doing things, and it's worthwhile to be aware of this, especially if you're going to have any managerial authority over IT. You want to be able to at least ask the right questions of your IT professionals and be able to judge if they have a viable plan in place to manage this stuff. So thank you very much, and we'll talk again soon.